from the SEC, we go to the Big 12, and by extension, the Pac 12, because, Trey, according to The Athletic, Brett Yormark might be getting the hands out again. They've talked about westward expansion before with the Pac 12. Obviously, BYU is about to be a new member in the Big 12. So they're in that footprint, quote unquote, but the Four Corners schools are apparently the apple of Yormark's eye. And, we were talking before we hit record. This seems to make a lot of sense. For those of you who don't exactly know who the Four Corners schools are, that's Colorado, Utah, Arizona, and Arizona State. And they're the subject of a fresh wave of discussion as the Pac-12 continues to wobble. We've dominated pod coverage on this subject for the last couple of weeks because it's just been a circus out west, right? I mean, is Ion going to take TV rights? Is Apple TV going to swoop in? Is it going to be streaming exclusively? We don't have any answers on that. And as basically each day that goes by that the Pac 12 doesn't have a secured media rights deal with a definite amount of money coming to each school as a part of redistribution, a fresh wave of rumors about who's leaving and when comes up.
Yeah, and apologies to our new partners. This does not happen all the time. That my cat wants to chime in on the. So if you're not watching on YouTube, apologies about that. But yeah, if I'm any program, right, that is looking at this Pac-12 situation, if I'm any program that has options, I'm exploring those options because it's a dog-eat-dog world out there. And obviously the two biggest brands in the Pac-12 and USC and UCLA, they were willing to put historic rivalries, history, just throw all that on the back burner, as so many other programs have done in the last decade plus to preserve their own self-survival. Like, this is looking out for yourself. You got to look out for number one in the world of conference realignment. And so if I'm one of those schools that gets an offer, a better offer, I'm going to jump at that. Like, there's no confidence right now in George Kliavkoff. There's no confidence that the Pac-12 is going to get this figured out in a way that makes sense for anybody involved. And on the flip side, you've got the Big 12 that is making huge moves. I know there's been rumors about even expanding the basketball brand even more. I've seen rumors. I had a friend this weekend show me some rumors on Twitter of them possibly offering Gonzaga and Villanova as basketball only memberships. And so the Big 12 is doing what the Pac-12 thinks they're doing and what the Pac-12 has thought they've been doing for a decade. The Pac-12 really likes to think that they're on the cutting edge and that they are innovating and, providing themselves, like putting themselves at the forefront of college athletics. The Big 12 is actually doing that. They are the ones making the moves. They're the ones, going all in on a couple of basketball schools to make the best basketball conference in history. If they were able to land that, that's innovative. That is marketing yourself. They're even talking about maybe even the same rumor was talking about selling the basketball rights separately than the football rights. Like, that is innovative. That's being real about your place and wanting to be that third best conference. Pac-12, while they think they're doing that by exploring these streaming rights and stuff like that, it's just falling on deaf ears at this point. And so if you have a way out, I would take it if I was in those situations.
I agree. And, we had people tweeting at us that was like, no, one person in particular was saying, oh, there's no way that those Four Corners schools would leave. Oregon and Washington would never leave because culture and academics.
Neither would USC, right? Neither would UCLA.
Well, and that's what I replied with was like, okay, so please explain how USC and UCLA fit in this Midwest culture that is the Big Ten. They tweeted at me a graphic about academics and money spent. If you think culture can be defended by dollars spent on certain programs or certain wings of your academia, we have very different definitions of culture, right?
Yep.
And so for me, USC and UCLA stick out like sore thumbs in the Big Ten, right? I mean, when you think of the Big Ten, you think of the Heartland and you think of Piscataway. You don't think of sunny Los Angeles. I'm sorry.
I still don't think of Piscataway when I think of the Big Ten, but I digress.
Fair enough. Trying to throw my Rutgers fans a bone. But the point is, college football has evolved past this rosy, traditional memory that we all have growing up, right? And whether that's good or bad, you can debate for hours, and people do on Twitter every single day. But the reality is, when you have so much money to play for, um, and so many eyeballs that can be added to your program, to your brand, that then become bottom line revenue years down the line, like that's what schools are going to pursue. Sports as a whole are bucking tradition in favor of the almighty dollar.
Yep.
And it's sad to see that truly be the case, no matter where you look, but it's the reality. And so for me, if you're saying that tradition, culture, academics are going to hold the Pac-12 together, I'm gonna show you the TV guide for Ion at 3 p.m. on a Saturday afternoon when it's I Love Lucy, and I'm gonna say nope, sorry. Arizona State's not really interested in being a part of that. They would like to go on ESPN or Fox or wherever and get basically double the amount of money, have a nice raise that they're gonna get in conference redistributions every single year, and so for me, and from what I've heard it from different people that I've talked to in the industry, it truly does seem like this is a matter of time, when we'll have some sort of news about a school or schools formally exiting the Pac 12. I don't have a timeline on that. I don't have an indication of a specific school. That just certainly seems to be the way that the wind is blowing, which is so fascinating because you still have SMU and San Diego State knocking at the door,
And
begging to
really
be let in,
excited. They're
and
really
are very
excited.
excited and are very excited. And listen, I mean, I guess compared to the American, is it a perceived promotion? Sure. In reality, though, I just don't know how much of a likelihood that is. The other thing that I maybe want to float on this, and then we can move on. You have all these SMU fans, all these San Diego State fans saying, "Let us in, let us in. When are we going to know?" If you're the SMU or San Diego State administration, are you maybe saying, hang on, before we join, we would love to see who your media partner is? Because while the American does not have this flashy deal, they're still on ESPN.
Released on ESPN.
They're still in the public eye. The group of five has received so much momentum and so many new fans over the last several years. It's not the bitcoins of the world, right? Where just stock just takes off. But maybe this is a defense contractor. Just year over year return. You're gonna sell high, you bought really low, and you may not make 100% gain on this trade, but hey, you know what? 35%, it's still in the win. It's still in the green, right? It's still a winning trade. I don't know that you want to try and buy the dip with the Pac-12. All right, am I wrong?
I love the analogy. Yeah, like because there's definitely going to be two different schools of thought here, and for SMU specifically, they're always going to be stuck in Texas, and that sounds like a good thing. They're going to have a lot of access to talent in
Breaking
Texas.
news: SMU will always be stuck in Texas.
SMU is, as far as I know, they're not planning on moving their campus to somewhere else. But what I mean by that is they're not going to be ever be the top brand in the state of Texas, and so they need something to stand out. They need something. They saw their fellow Metroplex private school TCU go to the Big 12, and at the time, 10 years ago, everyone thought the Big 12 was a ticking time bomb. Everyone thought that
Sure.
the Big 12 was eventually going to completely fizzle out and just not be a thing anymore. And TCU took that gamble at a Big 12 invite, and fast forward, they're in the college football playoff 10 years later. So, not saying that that's in the cards for SMU if they go to the Pac 12, but they definitely have a story that they can look to not too far away from an extremely similar school. I know TCU and SMU fans will hate me saying that, but the circumstances are very, very similar for this. Now, I think that Big 12 in 2012 versus the Pac 12 in 2023, don't know that that's an apples to apples comparison because
Mhm.
you have a lot of schools actually with options. What really kept the Big 12 together for so long is that 80% of that league didn't have an option to go anywhere
Mhm.
else to another Power 5 conference. So that's not the case with the Pac 12. If you're SMU, it's really going to be a gamble. If you hitch your wagon to that, it's if you know what you're going to get in the American. So it's really just a philosophy of, do you want to stick with what you want to know, or do you want to gamble and hope that you hit big and you can keep the Pac-12 together? Now, Mitch, I want to just flesh out this conversation before we completely move on. Let's pretend it just goes completely nuclear for the Pac-12. Let's say the four corner schools go to the Big 12.
Okay.
And Oregon and Washington leave for the Big 10. What do
Oof.
you do if you're the Pac-12? Because the idea that I have kind of, had a thought experiment on, do you at that point just try to convince Stanford and Cal to be your biggest brands and then merge with the Mountain West and just be like the Mountain and Pacific time zone conference, and then you could still keep the Pac-12 name. I don't think any of the Mountain West schools would have a problem with that, but basically just merge the leftovers with the Mountain West and call it a day. What do you do?
No, I think you have to go. I think you have to go national at that point. I think,
The
and
ACC merger?
yeah, and we've seen ideas thrown out on Twitter. Supposedly, I think Sidelines might have reported first, at least that was the report that I saw, that the Pac 12 and the ACC were at least maybe entertaining that option because.
But if you're the ACC and those 6 schools are gone, you've basically won the war. You've outlasted the Pac-12. So,
Well, but that's assuming that maybe Florida State, North Carolina, Clemson, don't leave,
yeah,
right? I
that's true.
mean, Virginia as well, because Florida State supposedly is talking with their board of regents about a buyout, which I believe is 128 million
Yeah.
to get out from the
It was a
ACC.
lot. We talked about that last week. I can't remember the exact number, but it was in the 9 figures.
Yeah, a large number. But again, for Florida State to hitch their wagon to the growing mega conference that is the SEC, they'll make that money up in 3 years time, and be hunky dory. And a lot of that would probably be written by a booster anyway. So if you're Florida State and you have someone else writing your checks and fighting your battles, I mean that's not exactly a lose, or well, yeah, it's a really really awesome perk.
Yeah.
So for me, I think that the Pac-12, if that happens, if you have both keys in the nuclear ignition, and I mean, it's Red Dawn, right? I mean, it's launch point. I think you have to go national. That is the only thing that will save your brand. And again, we're really only talking football here because that's the moneymaker, right? That and college basketball are the revenue generators. Um, but I think you have to go national to stay relevant in the playoff picture, to stay relevant from a recruiting standpoint. If Stanford and Cal are your best brands or your top brands, I mean, those schools sell academics more than anything. I guess Stanford technically sells athletics to a wider range of students, but it's not football right now.
Right.
I don't want to take away from the athletic achievement that Stanford has every single year. Them in Texas pretty much battle for the Learfield Cup on an annual basis. But as far as revenue generation goes, that's football. That is not what their football team does. So I think they have to go national.
Stanford's got to be kind of freaking out a little bit because if you remember around COVID, they were going to cut some athletic programs that are
They
going to have
got
some
bullied by their
championship
own
winning.
students. Yeah.
Yeah, and if they don't have the TV contract from a major conference, bye most of those championship winning programs, because there's just no money to
Right.
fund them short of a donor stepping up or short of that fit students like they did stepping up and like paying for it out of pocket, basically like a club sport. So Stanford's going to be really motivated to figure this out. Maybe you see them on the move too. Maybe they're an attractive brand to somebody. Maybe they can lump in with the Four Corners schools.
I think if we could just hit the button to fast forward 3 years down the line and
It's
see what college football looks like, you have 60 seconds to just survey the landscape before coming back to present. I mean, I think this could truly look like a new world. I
yeah.
mean, what is it? Little Mermaid, a whole new world, like that could be college football.
Aladdin, sir. That's the Little Mermaid. That's
My
Aladdin.
my bad. My bad. One of the Disney movies. Well, let's we'll talk about this, I'm sure, much more in other podcasts we have for like the last month and a half. So I don't think the topic's going anywhere.
Gracious him! How about